Hey, YouTube theologians, Sunday drive home. Pastor Wolfmueller here. God be praised that Jesus is the bread seeking hunger. We're in John chapter 6. This Sunday, last Sunday, Sunday before, this is this discourse of Jesus after he feeds the 5,000, which, interestingly, is the only miracle that's in all four, it's one of the only miracles in all four Gospels. I think also the resurrection. And that might be it. If you know of another miracle that's in all four of the Gospels, then put it please in the comments. But I think this feeding of the 5,000 is so important for John because John wants to capture it as the context for this big discourse that Jesus gives, the bread of life discourse that happens after the miracle. And so they've crossed over the water. Jesus walks on the water, catches up with them. They're on the other side. The crowd comes and finds them. They want more bread, and Jesus preaches, "I am the bread of life. I am the living bread. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the bread in the wilderness, the manna in the wilderness. They died. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood will live forever." This is what Jesus, and they all are kind of freaking out, and the crowd disperses. Maybe because Jesus didn't give them more bread to eat. Maybe because they understand theologically what he's saying and they don't believe what he's saying. So that at the end of it, Jesus says to his disciples, "Will you also leave?" And Peter says beautifully, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life." That's an amazing confession. But in the middle of it, Jesus is talking, he calls himself, this is one of the 7 I am the statements of John. Remember, there's 7 I am the, and then 7 just plain old I am. Like before Abraham was, I am. Or in the garden, who do you seek? Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am, and they tumble over. It's so great. There's 7 of those raw I am statements in John. Someone could also find those and put them in a comment. I'll pin that. But there's 7 of these. I am the good shepherd. I am the gate. Or the door. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the light of the world. I am the vine. There's all these I am statements. Here, this one is I am the bread of life. I am the living bread. I come down from heaven. And in this, Jesus is talking about his incarnation. There's an old debate about this John 6. I'm headed towards the Augustine thing, but just real quick, there's an old debate about John 6, especially in the Lutheran Church, and it's funny for new Lutherans because you read John 6, like coming out of evangelicalism where they taught that the Lord's Supper was just a symbol, a memorial meal or whatever, and you come into the Lutheran Church where they say, oh, it's the body and the blood. It's great. And then you get to John 6 and Jesus says, if you don't eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no part of me. The flesh that I give, the bread that I give for the life of the world is my flesh. And like, oh, the Lord's Supper. That's like first instinctive reading of it. And so a lot of new Lutherans are surprised that the old Lutherans taught that John 6 wasn't about the Lord's Supper. In fact, Luther will say some hard things like John 6 has nothing to do with the Lord's Supper. This is both, it comes first out of the fight that they were having because it was the Reformed who used John 6, especially that little line, the flesh profits nothing. They used that against the Lutherans' confession of the body and the blood. But I think that caused the Lutherans to take a more careful look at the text, and I think they did well to recognize that what Jesus was talking about in John chapter 6 was not communion, but rather incarnation. That he was talking about this manna coming down from heaven, and the disciples, the Pharisees get it. Because they say, how can he say he's the bread come down from heaven? We know his father and his mother, Mary and Joseph. In other words, they understand that Jesus is talking of his origin in heaven and that he is bread, human, come down from heaven, divine, and that it's a confession of the two natures. And to eat this bread is not the normal bread. Everybody else is bread from the earth, but Jesus is bread from heaven, and to eat this bread is to believe his incarnation. And so the Lutherans always understood John 6 to be talking about the incarnation, which certainly has to do with the Lord's Supper, because it's his incarnate body that he puts in the bread and the wine for us to eat in the supper, but it has a much broader application. Anyway, curious. That was 3 years of seminary fighting, by the way, just condensed down to 30 seconds for you guys. You are welcome. This is what you have to fight about at seminary. You have to sit there at lunch and talk about the Eucharistic interpretation of John chapter 6. Oh, it's great. If you're interested, you should go to seminary. Anyway, Augustine says, and I tried to find it in Augustine. It was quoted in Wordsworth in his Greek New Testament commentary, and I went and tried to find it in Augustine's John sermons. I couldn't find it, but Wordsworth says that Augustine comments on this great mystery of the text, that here, marvel of marvels, we have bread seeking hunger. And think about that, and just maybe in the reverse. Because what we are is hunger seeking bread, thirst seeking water, loneliness seeking companionship, guilt seeking absolution, darkness seeking light. Well, probably we're not that, but we are. In other words, it's the other way around. Normally the whole world is, I'm hungry, and so I'm looking for something to eat, and I'm going to look for it. And it's not just like I'm getting up from the couch and going to find some chips, but this is our whole lives are hunger seeking bread. Trying to scrape a living out of the ground like it was for Adam and Eve after the curse in the garden, and this difficulty in life, trying to find some sort of satisfaction or fulfillment. This is the whole picture of our life. If you could just put like a video camera on each person here, they're just driving along here, and you're like, there's a belly looking for something to eat. There's dissatisfaction looking for satisfaction. But in Jesus, the order is different. He is the living bread that comes down from heaven, and so this is the bread that is looking to satisfy. That's looking for the empty stomach to fill. Jesus says, this is not that far before, no, later, John chapter 7, where Jesus says, I'm the living water, all who come to me will never thirst. That's riffing on the woman at the well earlier in John, that he is water looking for thirst to satisfy. He is the holiness of God looking for sin to forgive. He is eternal life looking for death to destroy. He comes to us. The normal ordering and direction of everything is put on its head. So in the midst of our emptiness, in the midst of our hunger, in the midst of our discontent, in the midst of our shame, in the midst of our darkness, here comes the light and the covering and the forgiveness and the life and the living water and the bread from heaven. This is the promise that Jesus has for you. Look, He's after you, and He's after me. I am, He says to us, I am the bread of life. God be praised. Sunday drive home. I haven't been doing too many Sunday drive homes lately. It's been a crazy summer. I'm hoping to settle into a more regular routine now that we're inching towards the fall. Including I've got my mind on trying to write some essays, so Keep an eye out for that. Thanks for your encouragement. But if you're like, hey, there's not enough theology, where do we get some more theology? My number one recommendation is Issues, Etc. You know those guys at Issues, Etc. Their podcast. What do they have? They have the Word of the Lord Endures Forever on the YouTubes. So you can go and watch that. But subscribe to Issues, Etc. 2 hours every day. Todd with his guests is talking theology. So there's something for everybody. If you like to think about cultural stuff, if you like to think about biblical stuff, if you like to think about political stuff, if you like to think about theological stuff, it's really great. Pastor Ketchemeyer, my buddy, and I are on there every couple of weeks answering unanswered Bible questions. And those questions are getting harder. There were some tough ones this last week. The tough ones I say, that's for Ketchemeyer. Man, it's great. So I can't commend those guys to you enough. So one more announcement. We're having, this is 2024, October 11 and 12. We are having a young adult retreat here in Austin, Texas. I think it costs you $10. The theme is grounded, a really, really old faith. And so I'll be talking, I think I've got 2 or 3 sessions, and then I've got 2 sessions, I think, with Jonathan Mueller, our music director, will be in the sanctuary talking about how we have an old theology, an old practice, an old doctrine, an old teaching, and it connects us not only vertically with one another, but horizontally, but also vertically through time with one another, that we're connected with those Christians that went before us. So that should be a lot of fun, grounded here, Austin, St. Paul, Austin. I'll try to put a link to that in the description. Hope you can come. I think ages 18 to 35 for this young adult conference, not just for singles, for families too. So hope to see you soon.